Okay, so just like the last episode came about because I made a mistake in the review, I thought Yamato said something when it was actually Momonosuke that said it. This video's premise is about me taking something that seemed very simple or very obvious and making it into a way more complicated thing. Because that's how my brain works, Like, I'm reading the last chapter of One Piece, chapter 1008, and there's a scene at the end where Momonosuke just psychically knows what's going on with the battle on the roof between Kaido and Luffy, and he says to Shinobu, like, oh yeah, Luffy is fighting Kaido right now, he's getting beaten down, he's injured, but he's still okay, he's still fighting, right? And then Shinobu's like, oh, that's good to know, that's good that he's still fighting for us. Hey, wait a second, how do you know that? Because Shinobu and Momo and Yamato, they're all the way down on the, like, lower floors, and that's happening up there. Like, how do you know? So the way my brain works, even though, like, everybody else's probably first reaction to that was like, oh, Momo has observation hockey, or it's because of the voice of all things that's already been previously established in the story, like the whole reason he stayed behind at Zou to, like, commune with Zunisha, the giant elephant, that probably has some explanation on why, Momo just knew what was going on with Luffy and Kaido and everything. No, I completely gloss over that, and my mind immediately goes to, like, some crazy convoluted tangent where it's like, oh, well, the reason that Momo knows what's going on with Kaido is because Momo must be able to psychically see through Kaido's eyes. But how would Momo psychically be connected to Kaido? Maybe it's because of his devil fruit that was created by Vegapunk when he extracted some of the DNA from Kaido back on Punk Hazard and created the artificial dragon fruit, which Momo then ended up consuming, which basically led to the essence of the devil fruit being split from Kaido to Momo, but it's like Momo ended up with 1% of the power and Kaido ended up with 99% of the power, which is why that psychic connection exists, and Momo is able to tell how Luffy is doing in the fight. And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing that, and I'm talking about it in the review, and I'm like, man, that's a good explanation. I'm proud of that explanation. And then I upload the review, and it's like, yeah, or maybe he just has observation hockey. Or maybe it's, because of the voice of all things, which, once again, has already been established. I'm like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, that could be a explanation, too. But what if? I think it's because I'm always trying to get one step ahead of Oda, right? Like, I'm always trying to find that, like, that one thing that, like, oh, Oda wants us to think it's just observation hockey, or he wants us to think it's the voice of all things, but no, there's actually something else going on here, okay? You know what it really comes down to? It comes down to the fact that Momo is part of this battle, right? But he's not really part of this battle, right? He's a little kid. His zone transformation really isn't suited for combat in any particular way. And yet Oda still, like, establishes, like, Momo is going to be doing something very relevant in this battle of Onigashima. Like, I don't think it's too much of a far cry to say that the way that Momo is being built up, he might very well have a very integral role to play in the downfall of Kaido. Like, it's through something Momo is going to do that Kaido might end up being defeated. And I'm still trying to rack my brain figuring out, like, how, though? How is he going to do that, right? Because even up until, like, last chapter, he was, like, lamenting his own powerlessness and talking about how weak he was and how scared he was. And he has done some stuff that were very, brave in this arc, like the declaration he made on the scaffolding, I am the son of Oden Kozuki, I am Momonosuke Kozuki, right? He did that. There's moments like that. But I'm trying to think of a way that Momo could be an integral role here in taking out Kaido without being it just like a Deus Ex Machina all of a sudden. It's something that had to have been established already for it to make sense, and considering we did have the Cypher Pole Zero talking about his devil fruit specifically, that's where I got to the arrival of that, where it's like, oh, well, maybe they're invisibly connected through their devil fruits. And I even saw some people talking about the possibility, like, well, maybe because it's the same devil fruit just split between different bodies, maybe you can have a thing where, like, Kaido's devil fruit essence could be taken out of him, and then Momo could get all the power, and so Momo could turn into the giant dragon, and then Kaido turns into the smaller one. All right, so that would be a way to vastly weaken him. And you know, you can't even say that like, oh, that would be an ass pull or that would have come out of nowhere. You know, it was already established that Vegapunk did research on Kaido directly. He directly removed part of his lineage factor to make the artificial dragon devil fruit. So the fact that like something that Momo does with his devil fruit could connect back to Kaido's devil fruit, like they're two halves of the same coin, like that's not a ridiculous premise. Likewise, we've had many scenes where Kaido is this giant dragon with the breath weapons and everything, and Momo is like, man, I wish I could, you know, be a giant dragon like that. You know, people are trying to throw out ideas, kind of theories of like, how could Momo, you know, like gain all this power all of a sudden? And like, well, that's one way that it could go. That would actually be rather interesting, to weaken Kaido to the extent where he could not use his devil fruit anymore. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the thing, though. That would not necessarily mean that, like, Kaido all of a sudden gets so weak that he wouldn't be able to fight. That would still make Kaido pretty damn tough, because he still got his original body that he had before he consumed the Ua Ua no Mi. He still got his Kanabo. He still got Haki. He still got Observation. He still has all that stuff. He still has his ridiculous amount of, like, endurance. You've just weakened him to the point where he can no longer use his dragon transformation. So that would be a massive advantage to everybody involved, but it would still be a tough fight. You know, I could even see the scene where, I don't really know how this would work, if Momo does something, or like Vegapunk shows up and something with him, or how this would go or whatever. But let's say through some mechanism, you know, Momo absorbs Kaido's dragon powers in some way. All right, let's just assume that that happens. Not sure how it would happen, but let's just roll with that theory for right now, okay? So Kaido can't use his dragon powers, and he's just like, all right, well, I don't need my dragon powers to kick all your asses. And then he just, like, hockeys up his Kanabo and, like, you know, Thunder Bagara! Like, it's still ridiculously powerful, even his original form. And that would be cool, actually, because then maybe we can get a little bit of a flashback with Kaido. We can get a flashback to when he first consumed the Ua Ua no Mi at God Valley. We get that backstory of how Big Mom saved him from death. Could have been a situation where, you know, like Kaido is on the cliff of God Valley, and because of the fight between Zebek and Garp and Roger, like the whole island is like, you know, splitting apart and giant earthquakes and tornadoes. Like it's like Armageddon on this freaking island of God Valley, and Kaido's about to fall into the water, and then Big Mom shows up and like gives him the Ua Ua no Mi, and that's how he first transforms in a dragon to save himself, okay? And that's the lifelong debt that Big Mom spoke about to Kaido. So we could have a little flashback with that, but we could also find out a little bit more about Kaido's, like, original body. Like, is he descended from an ancient giant, or some kind of Oni race, or something like that? That would be cool, right? We could have it like, you know, you took away my dragon powers, you know, like, you took away my dragon powers, but I'm descended from the ancient giants, Ors, you know, or maybe Ors's ancestors, because remember, Ors was an ancient giant, and he was pretty big, and he was pretty badass, but he lived about 500 years ago. And that skull on Onigashima, the Skull Mountain, Muffin Mountain, is way bigger than Ors's even body was. Like, you know, Ors was a big guy, but Ors could fit comfortably inside of that giant Muffin Mountain, and that's just the skull of that giant. Right? Like, if that was a living thing at one point, which I'm assuming it was, I don't think Oda, I mean, it would be pretty cool to have a giant mountain in the shape of a skull, but I'm pretty sure the skull is like an actual skull of a living creature that existed back during the Void Century, maybe even well before the Void Century. This thing is so old. Like, if we're going by the fact that, like, over the years, the ancient giants, you know, their genetics have weakened or whatever, and they get smaller and smaller with each, like, successive generation. If we're going with that kind of logic here, Ors, the size he was, I think he was, like, you know, getting close to, like, I think he was like 68 meters, you know, or something, maybe close to 70 meters. You know, back 500 years ago, that was the size of Ors. Ors Jr. is like his grandson, I'm assuming, because he's Ors the Third, and he's roughly the same height. He's a little bit shorter, but overall, if these ancient giants kept getting smaller with each generation, in order to get an ancient giant the size of a mountain, or the skull the size of a mountain that we're doing right now, like, literally all these battles that are going on right now are happening inside of this thing's skull. So we probably have to go back, you know, thousands of years, maybe even tens of thousands of years, to get to the point where an ancient giant was just that freaking huge, right? But if we ever got to that point and Kaido is like a direct descendant from the ancient giant race back in the day, that would still make him like ridiculously powerful. That would explain his, like, it's not because he's a dragon that he has like tough like skin. It helps when Kaido transforms into a dragon and he's got the scales and everything. Luffy even mentioned, punching through his scales was something very hard to do. But even without the dragon scales, he's pretty tough in his own right. He jumped off a freaking sky island 10,000 meters up in his regular, human Oni giant form, hit the ground. He wasn't in dragon form when that happened. He wasn't in his hybrid form either. He was just in his normal form, and bam, he was able to survive that drop, okay, with just like a mild headache. Popped an Advil, he was fine, right? So, that's for everybody out there that's like, if Momo absorbed the dragon powers, or if you got the dragon powers out of Kaido somehow, through some kind of ability, that would be cheap. That would weaken him to the point where that wouldn't matter. It's like, oh no, the fight would still be on, okay? And at that point, like, it would just be down to the explanation, right? But I think if it happened the way that I explained it, like, Momo absorbs his power, and then we have Vegapunk, or we have one of the one of the Cypher Pull members explain, like, oh, it must be because Momo's fruit was derived from Kaido, therefore they're linked. That's how Momo was able to absorb his powers. Very, very interesting, right? And another thing too, it might not be a one and done. It might not just be like Momo figures out a way to absorb Kaido's powers, and then he gets the powers, and then that's it. And then Kaido has no more dragon abilities. It might be a thing where it's like Momo figures it out, but Kaido also figures it out. Like, they both realize at the same time, like, oh, that's not good. Kind of like in the scene in Mob Psycho Season 2 when Mob is fighting the boss, and it's like at the same time they kind of figure out, like, the boss realizes the ability that Mob has to, like, absorb powers from others and give people powers, and the boss had that same ability, and he's like, oh, I need to end this kid's life right now. I need to end Mob's existence as fast as I can, because if he's left unchecked, he could be as powerful as me. It might be a thing like that with Kaido, where Momo maybe takes some of his powers away, and Kaido's like, oh no, he has the same devil fruit as I do. He can take away my power, I can take away some of his. I need to end his existence as quickly as possible, because if not, left unchecked, this could be an issue, right? And so it might be a fight where it comes down to, you still have Luffy and Zoro and Law and Kid and Killer, maybe some other people up there at that point, maybe Shinobu, maybe Yamato to help them all out, but it becomes Momo trying to get into a position where it's like, if he has to, like, bite Kaido or something to absorb the power or absorb the essence or something, so they have to help Momo get in position to absorb his dragon powers, and Momo finally succeeds, and Momo can turn into a large dragon. Like, even if it's not like a direct flip, even if it's not like, Kaido gets all of his dragon powers ripped out, and then Momo can turn into the giant, Azor dragon. Even if it's like a 50-50 split, where it's like Kaido gets half of the dragon powers, Momo gets the other half, that would still be a huge benefit to the battle. That would help everybody out. And that would be a moment where it's like, okay, Momo was able to do that. Yes, he's not as strong as Odin, but because of his devil fruit, he does have this weird ability that we can take advantage of in this particular instance. So we can have that moment of triumph for Momo, and he's like, I actually did something, I actually contributed into the battle. It's not like Momo showed up all of a sudden and he could just kick Kaido's ass. It's like, I weakened him to the point where now Luffy and everybody else, it will be a lot easier on them. Still will be a difficult battle, but it will be easier on them. Also, you can have a situation where after the battle is over, if Kaido does not die, if they don't straight up kill Kaido, you can have a moment where after he's defeated, like, oh, hits the ground, you could then have a moment where Momo can use the rest of it and, like, absorb all of the dragon powers. So Kaido doesn't have any anymore, something like that. So, Kaido's, like, one of his big benefits in battle, being able to turn into a giant dragon with the breath weapons and the tornadoes and the flame clouds and everything, he can't do that anymore. Now, Kaido has been captured before. He has been, captured by other Yonko and by Marines and stuff. So that wouldn't be too unusual for him to be defeated to the point where he could be chained up and then dragged away. Personally, like, he's probably going to escape again, because he's done that, like, so many other times before this. I think over, like, 24 times he's been captured and then either been freed by his own crew or escaped under his own power. But If he was going to be freed by his own crew, that might not happen anymore, because after this battle, it might be a situation where, like, Jack, Queen, King, all of the Toby Roppo, they're not going to be in a position to help Kaido out. They might be defeated as well. Yamato's definitely not going to help Kaido out anymore. You know, all of the other members of the Beast Pirates, especially the Waiters and the Pleasures, if they survive this battle, they're quitting. They're handing in their 2 weeks notice. Actually, screw the 2 weeks notice. They're handing in their resignation letter. Bam! I'm out of here, right? After all that crap that happened with Queen and the virus, the Ice Oni virus, and Queen basically just came out and said, you know, yeah, Waiters, Pleasures, you're literally only here to further my virus, to kill as many people as possible, including yourselves. So, you know, just be good little soldiers and just die for the cause, right? Yeah, after this is all over, the Beast Pirates even said they're done. All right, so, I mean, the Toby Roppo are going to be defeated, the Calamities are going to be defeated, and Yamato is, you know, not on Kaido's side, and with the Pleasures and the Waiters leaving, a lot of the Gifters and the Headliners are going to be defeated as well. The Beast Pirates are going to be in ruins. They're going to be, as Law would say, shambles. I apologize, that was a bad joke, but they're going to be in shambles after this arc is over. I mean, some of them will still be alive. I don't think, like, all of the Calamities or Toby Roppo. It's One Piece. You know, death is not something that happens. They'll probably just be captured and carted off to Impel Down, I would assume. But point is, if Kaido gets captured, he's not going to be able to rely on his crew to save him. And if he doesn't have the dragon powers anymore, that's also going to be a little bit more difficult for him to escape. But he still has a ridiculous amount of haki, and he still has that, like, endurance and everything like that. And plus, his lineage is also a big deal, right? But it might weaken him to the point where it's like, okay, we've got Kaido out of Wano. So at the very least, Kaido cannot just, like, turn back into a dragon and invade Wano again. Like, that possibility's taken out. And if Momo has the power of the dragon fruit, like, truly, that'll be a nice little duality thing where it's like Wano got thrown down into hell because of the machinations of Kaido and Orochi, and this, like, dragon god appearing above the capital. The dragon has always been kind of a scene of, like, evil, because Ryuma slayed the dragon, and then Kaido was the dragon. So the people of Wano probably don't like dragons very much. But if it's Momo that then receives this power and then becomes, like, a good dragon, sort of like, I am another dragon god, I'm the good dragon god, I'm like a beacon of hope for the people of Wano, and I'll make sure that as a shogun, if I train with my powers, to protect the island with my dragon powers, just as Kaido ruled over it with his. Alright, so it's kind of like that. That would be a really interesting thing to go down. Now, I can understand why a lot of people would be against this, too. I can understand why a lot of people, especially if you're annoyed with Momonosuke, like, oh god, I hate Momonosuke, he's just there, would you just get rid of him, he's not relevant here. I mean, he is relevant, but it's like, I want to see Luffy and Zoro beat down Kaido. I don't care what's going on with Momonosuke or whatever, his lineage, I don't care, right? So if all of a sudden he turned out to be the one that's going to be the deciding factor for this war, I think everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people would be, like, against that. But I'm just saying, with everything that's been established with the Devil Fruit and Vegapunk and how that's been kind of relevant in the last few chapters, it's been mentioned quite a bit. With all that stuff happening, yeah, I can see something happening with that. So just brace yourselves. Even if you're not a big fan of Momonosuke's character, brace yourselves, because that might be the road Oda's going down here. Oh yeah, of course. And then there's the whole thing with, what if it was just observation haki? What if it was just the ability to hear the voices of all things, and that was the reason he knew what was happening with Luffy? Well, even if you consider that the case, I still think Momo is going to play a pivotal role in this battle. Maybe you could just say, well, he's not here to play a pivotal role. He's here to be the shogun after the battle is over, right? But I don't think that's the case. I think Oda is going to do something with his character right here in this war in some way. Yes, he does have the ability to hear the voice of all things. He can hear it just like Odin could hear it, just like a lot of the other members of the Kozuki clan could hear it. And that's going to play something very important with the Will of D, you know, and really what all that comes down to, like what the voice of all things is. We assume it's just an advanced form of observation haki, like the highest form of observation haki, and only a few people can awaken it. Roger had the ability, Luffy had the ability, but also keep in mind, the way Roger and Luffy had it was a little bit different, because Luffy was not able to communicate with Zunisha, Momo was able to do both. Momo was able to hear Zunisha's cry and also able to speak, and the elephant could understand it. Luffy could hear Zunisha, but when he spoke, Zunisha could not understand Luffy, right? It was more of like, in that situation, it really was like a psychic connection between Momo and Zunisha. So we might find out something more about that. You know, like the Kozuki clan has this ability naturally. Meanwhile, Roger and Luffy maybe have it through some other means, but it's not perfected or something. You know, that's the reason, or they can't unlock the full nature of it yet. Maybe something along those lines, right? Or maybe it might be something specific just for Zunisha, where Zunisha was directly tethered to somebody, like the person that ordered the elephant to begin its journey and walk around the world as punishment was a Kozuki, maybe. So because it was a Kozuki way back in the day that ordered Zunisha to start walking, it's only a Kozuki that can issue it orders. So yes, the voice could be heard by Luffy and Roger if he was alive as well, but only Momo can issue the order. Might be something like that. In that case, Momo can still hear the voices of all things, but in the case with Zunisha, it's like a specific thing between the Kozuki clan. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video and my wild tangent. Let me know if you think it has any, credulity below. Let me know about that. This will be Tekking and Barry and Clone Barry and a Japanese Kanabo signing out. Thanks, everybody. April 1st is coming up soon. I wonder about that.